Good morning, everyone. Hello, hello. I see so many familiar faces in chat. Susan, Rick, Jenny, Judith, Sam, Carla, Sean, Mark, Tunk, Akin. Welcome everyone back to Behance on Adobe Live. Thank you all for joining me. My name is Voodoo Val, and I am going to be your host again this morning for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. I'm super pumped to be here, very excited to jump into what I have planned for today. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can get involved in the challenge with me and participate with everyone here on Behance. If you're over on YouTube, I know I see a few people over there, Masarul and Gaurav and Dubal and Wamiti and Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us. But if you please could head over to behance.net/live, that is where I am going to be reading the chat for the duration of the stream. So head over here and let's get started. So if you folks have not already, please head over to the landing page for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. You can find that at behance.net/challenge/Photoshop, and it looks like this. Every morning we are going to basically release a challenge to you. You can see we've done 6 of the challenges already, and all of them have been kind of loosely themed around the farming RPG theme. So if you folks are fans of Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon or Animal Crossing, this is definitely the challenge for you. But if you're not really a gamer and you don't really like farming RPGs, that's totally fine. You can use these challenges to create whatever you want according to any theme that you're into. That's totally fine. No need to do any farming themed challenges if you don't want to. This morning we are doing a challenge on texture. So it says create an object such as a bucket or farm tool, then give it a realistic finish using blending modes and textures. So I'm very pumped about what we have planned for today. If you'd like to join me, all you have to do is hit that get started button up there and it will give you a link to download the starter file that I have prepared for you. And if you need to come back and re-watch the challenge, or maybe you can't stay for today, or maybe you are watching in the future today, you can always come back to this page, hit the watch video button, and it will bring you back to the recording of this challenge, and that goes for all of the challenges previous. So if you'd like to go back to some of the previous ones, you can always click the watch video button for those as well. If you head over to this URL, bit.ly/PS Discord, making sure that P and that S are capitalized, you will get to our Discord, which looks like this. I'm so excited to show the Discord today. You guys have done such an amazing job going through the challenges for these past days. I am so impressed with all of the animations that came in. Looks like Sunny just posted theirs. Robin or Tristan has got this beautiful little tulip. Ebony's has posted this wonderful little sun rising thing in all of his little challenge entries for the scarecrow. Same with Nicola. You guys have done such a wonderful job. Look at these animations. Look at this. This is so great. Look at that. That is so wild. I'm so impressed. I came in here to look through and see what you folks had been creating for the challenges, and I am just blown away by all of these that everyone has posted. They are so good. Look at that. This is a great example of somebody who, you know, didn't do the farming RPG theme and just went their own direction, went their own way, and did some wonderful animations. That is great. I love, look at the little snail. Oh no. This is so great. I love that added detail of just the water kind of dripping around after the watering can tips back up. That is so great. You guys have just really, stay healthy. You guys have just really knocked this out of the park. I am so impressed. So impressed. Look at this. Look at this. This swimming koi fish that came in. This is just so good. They're so good. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. This is so nice, Farah, with the thank you voodoo and the animation in the flower pot. I'm just digging it. Happy Halloween from Ellen. This is just great. You guys have done a wonderful job. And oh my gosh, I did not realize that was a dinosaur. Oh my goodness. You guys have done such a great job. I'm excited to see all of the challenge entries that come after this. I just wanted to really give you guys a shout out and let you know that I have seen your entries in the Discord and I am thoroughly impressed. Look at this from Ninja Rose, this whole row, 3 rows of plants growing here in this animation. That is just so cool. This Hooster has stolen my heart. This is from Carla. This Hooster wakes up the farm bright and early to get the day started. I would love to meet this Hooster. It's adorable and great, and I'm so glad that this is what you chose to create for your daily creative challenge. It is wonderful. But yeah, well done, everyone. You guys have done such a great job. And now we're going to jump into what I have planned for the next challenge. So, as I said, we are going to be jumping into putting a realistic finish on some farm-oriented items. But if you would like to choose a different kind of item to do this challenge for, that is totally fine. I've made you this starter file with some basic starter shapes, and I'm going to show you how I go about making something look realistic with a starting point of very basic flat shapes. So I think what I'm going to create is a flower pot. I thought that that was pretty farm oriented to make a pot for something to grow in, and I'm about to show you how I do this. So I'm going to real quick, I'm going to group together my text layers here, and I am going to hide them, and I'm going to grab my starter shapes and I'm going to Control T to free transform, and I'm going to bump them up just like that into the center of my canvas. I'm going to zoom in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of depth with an airbrush brush in a way that you folks can do this if you have just a mouse to work with or a trackpad to work with. So one of the things I'm going to keep in mind while I'm doing this, first of all, is how light is going to hit this object. Now, when you do have some shine, like kind of hitting the surface of an object, maybe from the front and slightly to the side, you do get some darker areas around the edges and around the bottom. You do get some lighter areas in the center, and then you get the brightest highlight wherever the light is hitting the object directly on. So I'm going to show you how I recreate that. And the first thing I'm going to do is make a clipping mask. So I'm going to close this layer group of all of my starter shapes. I'm going to say Control-Shift-N to make a brand new layer. I'm going to right click it and I'm going to say Create Clipping Mask. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard to select my brush. I'm going to make sure caps lock is off. If you've ever run into this issue, I'm going to make my brush a little larger here. You can make your brush larger with the left and right bracket keys, by the way. If you ever run into the issue where you know that your brush is on a large setting, but you cannot see the shape of the cursor, chances are you probably have caps locks on. So if I turn caps locks on, it just gives me this little pinpoint here, and I can't actually see how large my brush is, but when I turn it off, I can again see the shape and size of my brush. So I am going to select the soft round brush, which is a brush that is included in Photoshop. There's no need to download anything or prepare anything to use that brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit like a 3 or a 4 on my keyboard, because when you press the numbers 1 through 0, it actually changes the opacity of your brush or your eraser. So if I hit 4, then you can see it drop down to 40% up here. If I hit 7, it goes to 70%. But I really want to use a pretty light version of this brush. So I'm going to try a 4 and see what that's like. And I do have black selected on my brush right now. And I am going to just click and drag around on my canvas around in the shape of the flower pot that I'm making, just to add a little bit of shadow around the edges, which I think that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new clipping mask with Control-Shift-N, making a new layer, and I'm going to right click and apply another clipping mask. Now, basically what this does, and I've said this before in previous challenges, but in case you weren't here to hear that, because I made this first layer a clipping mask, everything that I put on that layer is only going to adhere to whatever is just below it. In this case, it is more than one layer, but because it's grouped together, it will adhere to the shape of all of those layers put together, which is why it did not go out of the lines or out of the boundaries of the shape below it. Making another clipping mask above that clipping mask continues to do that so long as all of these clipping masks are pointing to the same source. If I were to make a new layer in between these, then this clipping mask would only point to that new layer. But if all of the layers in a row are all pointing downward into this one shape, then they will all do the exact same thing by adhering to the boundaries of that bottommost layer that they are pointing to, which makes this very easy to kind of create a nice illustration or a nice icon or logo or whatever it is that you're working on. So you don't have to worry about staying in the lines, especially if you don't work with a stylus and tablet. So on this clipping mask, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my Alt key because that turns my cursor into the eyedropper tool. I'm going to select this gray color and I'm going to come over here to my color palette and I'm going to select a color that is just slightly brighter than that, and I am going to put in a little bit of color here. And then I'm also going to make another clipping mask, do the same thing, right click it, create clipping mask, and I'm going to select a color that is even brighter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn this on an even lower opacity. I'm going to try a 20 and see how I like that. I made my brush a lot smaller, as you can see. I'm going to hold shift because I want to, if you hold shift while you're using your brush or your eraser tool, it will actually snap and make a perfect straight line, even if you're not dragging in a direction that is a perfect straight line. So I'm going to make a line up and down here, just like that. I think that works. And I'm going to do another one over here. It does not have to be perfectly symmetrical because I'm kind of going to suggest the lighting source is a little bit in front of this flower pot and then off to the right. So I am going to put those lines in there. I'm going to make maybe a larger brush here and I'm going to put one right there. Now, one thing that you might realize while you're doing this is, and I'm going to make a new layer to do this demonstration. I'm going to grab a, excuse me, I'm going to grab a red color so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. If I hold shift and I make a line, let me turn that to a higher opacity, and I make a line, and then I go to make another line, you might start getting this weird zigzag color, and that is because you can actually also make straight lines by simply holding shift and then clicking in another direction, and it will make a straight line. And you can continue to do that, and it will always make a straight line for you. So it's kind of an interesting way to design with straight lines without only making those lines in a manner of dragging your cursor. So if you are not wanting to have those zigzag connections, all you have to do is make your line and then click first without holding shift and then do it. And there will be no connection between those two. Because basically you need to tell Photoshop that you are not trying to connect everything, that you are starting a brand new line. So that's how to fix that issue. Now I'm going to turn this new empty layer into another clipping mask, and I am going to sample this bright color that I have here, and I'm going to get an even brighter color, but not quite a white, because you may want to use white to add some extra highlights into your design, and so you want to save that true white value for that. So I now am going to turn this to a lower opacity yet again, and I'm going to add one more even brighter line, and then I'm going to make my brush smaller and add a bright line right there. So this kind of shows a little bit of shine on here, but it's not quite 100% what we're looking for. So I'm going to show you how to make this even more detailed. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to open my starter shapes thing here. I'm gonna click on, you'll notice that this is actually a separate part up here, this lip of the flower pot. I'm going to say Control J to duplicate that. I'm gonna select the bottommost version of that. I'm gonna free transform by hitting Control T, and I'm gonna use my arrow keys to bump this down slightly, like so. And then I'm going to Control U to open up my hue and saturation panel, if it will open, which it is not, and I'm not sure why that's happening, but that's fine. We can actually come up here to image adjustments, and we should be able to, oh, maybe I can rasterize it. Maybe that is my problem. Let's see. There we go. So I rasterized it, I right-clicked it and rasterized the layer so it's no longer a smart object, which is strange. Not sure why it did that, but we can still work with it. So I am going to bump the lightness down to a dark here, and you'll see that that actually adds kind of a nice lip to the bottom here, so you can actually see a differentiation between the lip of the pot and the bowl of the pot itself. And you can do that with both of these if you want to add more depth. I'm going to go ahead and leave it just on this, just adding this one lip to it. I think that that is fine. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add some textures to this. So I'm going to close this group that I have here. I'm going to come up to the topmost clipping mask layer that I have here, and I am going to bring in a texture. So I'm going to go to my libraries because I have some cool textures that I've saved from some of the first DCCs that I ever taught that will be perfect for this challenge. You can grab whatever kind of textures you want. You could use metal textures for this. You could use cement textures for this. You could use old paper textures for this, because what it actually is doesn't always reflect what effect you can create with it. If you're looking to make kind of a clay pot, which is sort of what I'm doing today, you can still use textures that aren't necessarily clay in order to mimic that texture. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to use some of these gold textures. I'm going to drag and drop this into my file, and I'm going to hit OK. And when I come over here to my layers, you'll see that I do have that, because I had selected this layer, it added that shiny yellow foil texture to just above it. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to also turn that into a clipping mask so it adheres just to the boundaries of my flower pot. I'm going to say Control T. I'm going to rotate this because I do like that it has this shine in kind of the similar place as the textures that I've chosen. And I'm going to line it up with that. And I'm going to say OK. I'm actually going to turn this to like a black and white color. And there's a lot of ways that you can turn something into like a black and white version of itself, more of a grayscale image. There's ways that you can go in to, I believe, image and adjustments, and you can turn something to black and white, which is cool. So you can go ahead and do that. Or if you want a quick and easy way, not always 100% accurate, but still a viable method for this, you can say Control U to open hue and saturation, and you can turn the saturation all the way down. And then you can go into levels by saying Control L, and you can edit the levels here to make this more dramatic in its values. And that is a way you can do that. Now I'm going to flip through my blending modes and find a blending mode that I think will work best. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to hover over these until I find one that works. I do have very particular blending modes that I prefer to use for something like this. Overlay is one of them, and soft light is one of them, and multiply is one of them. But depending on what colors and things you're using, my selected blending modes may not work for you, and sometimes it's fun just to see how all of these blending modes make an image interact with the subject matter. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on overlay, and I might even crank down the opacity real quick just to add a little bit of detail there. And I'm going to add one more texture. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to grab this gold foil texture because I like this one. I'm going to position it where I want. I'm going to say enter. Come back to my layers. I'm going to do the same thing, creating a clipping mask. As you can see, clipping masks are some of my favorite things. And I am going to also find a blending mode for this. Notice I did not make my second foil black and white, because I do want to add a little bit of color to this. Honestly, hard light's not so bad, but it loses a lot of my detail. You can really kind of get in here and, you know, divide is not bad either. It's a little bright, but let's see if we can work with it, shall we? I'm going to select divide. And in my first initial test of this, I did not actually select divide, but I think that I'm just going to go off and see if we can't experiment and work with this. So that's cool. It does look like a textured flower pot. We've got some issues here with the lip and shadow under here being kind of lost in the lighter points that I've added, but that's all right. I can show you how to fix that. So what I'm going to do on this plaque, I'm going to hit escape so I'm no longer selected on my blending modes here. I'm going to hit Control U to open up my hue and saturation, and I am going to drag this around until I find kind of a nice color for a flower pot. I kind of want a brownish color. That is cool. Maybe I'll crank the saturation down. Maybe I'll crank the lightness up a little bit so that it desaturates properly. That is not so bad right there. It's a little more red than I want, but we can kind of crank that down. That might work right there. So that works. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to make one more clipping mask, and then I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to grab a brush that is kind of a hard round pressure brush. I'm going to make sure that I turn, oops, gotta re-add that clipping mask. I'm going to make sure that I turn my opacity back up to 100. I'm going to sample this dark color. I'm going to make sure that I make my brush the same width as this little lip here, and you can do that again with the left and right bracket keys. I'm going to click, hold shift, and drag across here to add that lip back, which I think that looks pretty darn good. And then I'm even going to sample this lighter color and add kind of a lip of light color here, like so. And you can select and decide which colors are right for you. I might actually even erase a little bit from the edges here, but that just adds another little bit of light to this. I can even put a darker lip on the bottom of my pot like so. And that is how I go from simple shapes into creating a more detailed, a more realistic looking item. And you could do a lot of stuff with this. You could take this image and you could add it to our little, I just lost the word, our animation from yesterday. And I think I've got a few minutes left here, so maybe I can actually do that. We're designing on the fly here, folks. So I'm going to hide my background here. I'm going to grab all of my starter shapes and everything, and I'm going to group it together with Control J. This is something that I do a lot just to keep everything together. I'm going to Control J to duplicate that. I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to say Convert to Smart Object. So what I've done there is I have my group of stuff so that I am kind of working non-destructively in two ways here. I have my group of items here, and then I also have a new smart object from the group that I can then right click and say convert to layers again if I would like to go back to its reverted state. And I'm going to go open my folder. I'm going to navigate to my DCC entry from yesterday where we made our sprout. Let me see. I think that's one of my previous ones. There we go. And this is what I'm going to do. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try. So I am going to open my timeline so I can see my animation. And I have all of my things here, and I can press play and it does my little animation. I'm going to pause this. I'm going to hit C on my keyboard to extend my canvas a little bit. And then I'm going to come over here to my starter file. I'm going to grab my layer and hover over my layer here. Let's see. I'm going to add that in, crop, bump that down like so, enter. I'm going to grab this flower pot and I'm just going to drag it right here. And let's see if that works. I'm going to press play now. Ha! Check it out! How wicked is that? How awesome! And it just shows you, like, sometimes when you just have an idea, you can do that idea on the fly and see how it goes. So I hope that you all experiment with some interesting items to create for this project. I hope that you, maybe if you decide to make a bucket or a flower pot or something, you might combine it with your previous challenge entry. If you did not do yesterday's challenge, you can always go back to the landing page like I showed earlier and actually grab the files for that to make the animation and try making your own little animated flower pot project. So thank you all so much for joining me. I really loved doing this challenge for you. Thank you so much for your wonderful illustrations and entries in the Discord. I had such a blast looking through them. If you tuned into this late and you did submit an animation for yesterday's challenge, go back and watch the beginning of this video because I did go through them and give kind of a highlight to all of those wonderful entries, and I'm sure you'll probably want to see that, see if you got a shout out. But thank you again, folks, and I will see you actually later today for the design off with me and Cody Bear, and again tomorrow for another Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Stay tuned because we've got another awesome segment coming up after me, and I will see you folks later. Adios, everyone, and happy designing.